So I saw something interesting yesterday. I saw Barry Windsor Smith. I saw his first published Marvel work.
Really?
And I cannot recall what story this was, but my mind was blown because if you'd have handed me this comic book and asked me who the artist was, I'd have sworn up and down that it was Jack Kirby. And there's
really
nothing could have convinced me otherwise outside of seeing the credits. I mean, it was 100% unmistakably a Jack Kirby panel layout, line work.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was crazy how much this was Jack Kirby. And it was, but as far as I can tell, that was the only time he ever did that. And it was just mind blowing to see that, just to see this. It was a Jack Kirby clone.
That's craziness. So when because when I see Barry Windsor Smith, and I've been looking at the new his new Monsters book and everything, which is kind of his more contemporary, like his most recent stuff. But I guess if you like squint your eyes and peer real deep, you can see some Kirby in there, and in the same way that you can see some Kirby in almost every artist. But I've never thought of him as a Kirby style artist. That's bananas.
It's insane. This wasn't Kirby style. This was Kirby.
Just
I
Kirby.
I couldn't believe it in my eyes. It was incredible.
Now you said that was his first Marvel work?
Yeah, as far as I can tell, as far as what my research led me to believe, this was his first Marvel work.
Well, so that kind of tracks. I guess that would make sense because you think about it. I mean, Kirby is Kirby now, and Kirby was Kirby then, and so much of Marvel was built on work that either he or Ditko or Romita, kind of stuff. And I'm sure I'm leaving one or two off that people are going to shame me for, but it was based off of that look. So it doesn't surprise me if that was his first Marvel work, and he was like a young cat coming in, trying to maintain like a job, that he would emulate that. And he's such a talented, just fundamentally good artist, technically good artist, that it doesn't surprise me that he could emulate that to the point that it was, that you would, it kind of camouflaged. You would think it was Kirby. Yeah,
it was wild. It was wild to see.
It's bananas. Well, it reminds me of guys like, I think we were talking about this the other day, like Bill Sienkiewicz. When Bill Sienkiewicz started, he was a Neil Adams clone. Like the dude could do Neil Adams, just kind of amazingly. And then they took the reins off and let him cut loose, and then he became, the Bill Sienkiewicz that we know of today. This kind of avant-garde, impressionist style, balls to the wall artist that can do just incredibly crazy things. But he started out as Neil Adams. Would you call Neil Adams a realist?
I
don't know if that's like he's not necessarily, like, he tries to make them look anatomically correct, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know if I would call him he's not trying to make it look like a photograph, but I'm trying to think of what the right verbiage would be. But
anatomical correctness was a big thing with him.
Yeah, and he became Neil Adams out of it, so it worked.
Yeah,
it definitely worked.
Yeah,
but that's kind of like how someday folks will look back at the early years and they'll say, oh, that Matt Trogdon, he was his own man from the very get-go. He was never a clone. And you can really see the evolution of Matt Trogdon as you listen to the Southern Fried Geekery podcast, especially that one episode. You remember that one episode 177 that we're doing?
Yep, I remember that one.
Yeah. We're making history as we speak. And this is the Southern Fried Geekery podcast. As always, I am Caleb Alexander McKenzie.
Matt Trogdon.
And we're Craigless. Feels like we're hopscotching around these last few days, last few weeks, taking turns. But it's summertime. Things are happening. But I bet we're a betting man. I bet we can handle it.
Well, we're gonna do it anyway, whether we can handle it or not.
He leaves big shoes to fill. So
that's right.
But he had some stuff come up, some family stuff, taking care of his folks like a good man does, and he is off. But he sends his well wishes. Told everybody he would like to tell them hello. and we're going to go from there. So for those of you who are maybe new to the show, and you're listening to this, just a little bit of what we are, what we do. A couple of friends, got to know each other at the local comic spot, became buddies, and decided to do what all middle-aged white men do, and start a podcast because that just seems, it's the thing. It's what you do. And we've been doing this for a hot minute now. We love it. We get around to talk about the funny books that we know and love. If you like what you hear and you want to maybe experience more of it, you want to tap into it and maybe make it a more than everyday occurrence because you like engaging in conversation and you want to throw stuff up that we can, talk about. Go to our Facebook group, Southern Fried Geekery Podcast. Just type it in the search bar. It'll pop up. You can also follow us on Instagram and Twitter. We're at SFG Podcast on both of those. And if you got any comments, queries, you got any concerns, maybe you are you're a comic maker in your own right. And you're like, hey, I've got this thing. Maybe the guys would read it and talk about it on the show. Dude, we totally will. All you have to do is send it to us at our email address. We're southernfriedgeekery@gmail.com. We'll read what you got. We'll talk about it, and we'll, maybe some listeners will think, hey, that's something I need. Maybe we can get you a few dollar bills in your back pocket, which is kind of cool. I know with some other friends of ours that they said after we had them on, there was people that said, hey, no, I listened to the Southern Fried Geekery Podcast and we heard about it, and that's why we went and ordered it, which to me is just neat. Like that's not something I ever really contemplated when we started doing the podcast, that we would convince people to, usually it's just talking about comics that we pull off the shelf. But when you've got an indie comic or a friend and you're like, no, dude, you help me sell some units. Like, that's awesome. That's a good feeling. So
yeah, we're influencers.
Is that what we are? Are we official? Can I put that on my resume?
I think you should.
I'm
right up top.
It's going to be a bullet point.
Own it.
Totally making it a bullet point. So yeah, that's what we do. That's what we know. I guess I should say for the folks who are listening at home, again, most of you know this, but if you don't, we talk about comics on this show. We talk about comics that we've read throughout the past week. Every once in a while, we dip into some television, some stuff like that. And there's no real way to talk about the content of those things to give them justice, to do our due diligence as people who enjoy this kind of work without spoiling a few things. I think most of the time we tread semi-lightly, but this is like, how am I supposed to really get Matt to understand the weight of a burial, of a funeral that I'm going to talk about later without telling him who died? I can't do that. Like oh no, that was Joe from accounting. He doesn't know Joe from accounting, but when I tell you who it is, it's going to be heavy, and that's the point. So we got to talk about those things. Facts. Heavy. It's got that gravity.
Heavy.
It's got that gravity. So yeah, well, I mean, I guess, one good thing, I mentioned we talk about TV every once in a while. The only thing I've been watching lately is The Sopranos. So that shouldn't be a spoiler for anybody.
Gosh, well, yeah. I'm just, if it's a spoiler for you, you're doing yourself a big disservice by not watching The Sopranos. That's all I can tell you.
As I have done. I have disserved myself for years, but I'm remedying that right now. So
it's great. It's an outstanding crime drama. Outstanding.
So I've been watching this show, and they really do kill people in interesting places. Where is the one place you wouldn't want to be killed by a mob boss?
Oh my gosh. I wouldn't want to be killed by a mob boss in any place. But yeah. Wow. Yeah, I can't. That's yeah. So I'm drawing a blank here.
I've thought about this. For me, it would be the grocery store. I can't think of a more lackluster place to die than in the fruit aisle, beside like a 4-pack of bananas. I don't want to die there.
Well, I have a feeling if you keep watching, your take on that's going to change. You're going to be like, oh, that's so much worse. I think you'll find that.
Find my body clutching a kiwi. Like, that's not how I want to go out.
I'd be like, oh, look, Caleb was making good choices.
Health is what killed him.
Yeah.
He was going to make a smoothie and he got taken out. It's a bad idea. He should have stuck to the steaks that he knew.
The cigarette companies are going to use that picture for propaganda. Where's your healthy choices now?
It'll be the one time they catch me in the wine aisle not picking up, like a decent wine. I'll be holding like a bottle of Chianti with a frown on my face or something.
Yeah, got a box.
Well, all right, Matt. So I got a confession to make.
Mm-hmm.
I'm having some trouble getting my motor running this morning. I'm having some trouble getting in the mood to talk about comics. So I'm hoping you can help me out with that. Can you tell me a few things you read this week to put me in the mood to speak of such things?
I'll tell you about 3 such things. 3, starting with from IDW, number 5, the comic book history of animation. Mm-hmm. This is part 5. Anime Conquers the World. This is by Fred Van Lente, Ryan Dunleavy, and Adam Guzowski. This is the final part in this 5-part series. This is the second volume in the comic book history of. The first one was Comic Book History of Comics. Very interesting run. I'm really into documentaries and the history of any given subject that I like. And this talks about the how far back the formation of Pixar actually goes, which was very interesting. It goes back to the 80s that Pixar was actually formed. Really? Yeah, and that it had a big influence on Japanese animation. Which American animation had a big influence on Japanese animation that launched the anime market in Japan. So it's interesting to see how so many of these things tie together when it comes to animation and how far back it was when it started versus when, most of us became aware of. My favorite, I haven't watched a lot of anime in my day, but one of my all-time favorites is The Valley of the Wind, Nausicaa. I watched that one as a kid and it blew my mind. And that was the renowned anime, like the king of anime in Japan. That was actually his first anime movie. Okay. Which that surprised me. I was like, holy crap, that was his first movie and it was that outstanding. Unfortunately, though, and if you watch the American version, it's got an all-star voice cast, Patrick Stewart, Uma Thurman, and so on. But apparently it was heavily edited when it was released in America. So now I'm like, what version did I end up watching? Did I watch the heavily edited version or not? So now I'm very interested to see if I can go back and find an unedited version.
I guarantee they've done a dubbed version or a sub.
Well, it's dubbed.
Not dubbed, subbed. Yeah.
Yeah. All the American versions they revoice the cast with American actors. Mm-hmm. But I just don't know if the actual story editing, the version that I've seen, I know when I was a kid, I'm sure I saw the heavily edited version because I saw it when it came out. Right. But I watched it recently within the past couple of years. Now I'm like, well, am I still watching the heavily edited version or not? So anyway, interesting. I really like reading these things because I always learn some very interesting things on the, on these, this medium, whether it be animation or comic books that I've followed my entire life. It's like, wow. Right. Okay. So also I read from DC Comics, number 2 of 6, Batman the Detective by Tom Taylor and Andy Kubert. Sandra Hope did the inks. I'm really digging this story. And Kubert's artwork is killing it on this. Mm-hmm. It is so good. And Tom Taylor's really done a great job of telling this overall story, but he's also doing a really great job of character representation, I guess I would say it. The voices of the characters just feel spot on. Right. But the standout is Andy Kubert. I mean, this artwork is so good. I cannot recommend this enough. And then number 3 on my short stack, this one's interesting. So I picked this book up. This is actually from 1984 from Marvel. Krystar, the Crystal Warrior, number 8. So why in the world would you pick this up, Matt? Great question. I picked this up because the cover art on this comic book is interesting and famous in the heavy metal, hard rock music scene. Uh-huh. This is the artwork on this cover. Michael Golden did this. Mm-hmm. And what everybody now knows as the Danzig skull from the group Danzig of Glenn Danzig. He pulled this skull artwork from this cover and started using this as his band logo.
I did not know that part. I thought that the skull, I thought it was Danzig's first and he took it later. Like he took it from Danzig.
Absolutely not. No,
Really?
Danzig pulled this, and he actually started using it before the group Danzig. He started using it because Glenn Danzig's first group was the Misfits.
Misfits, yeah.
Then it was Sam Hain,
Mm-hmm.
and he started using the skull as the logo for Sam Hain, and then he carried it through to the group Danzig in the early years.
Is it Sam Hain or Samhain?
Well, I mean, it's yeah.
I'm joking. That was me trying to ruffle the punk rock feathers in the back.
Yeah, it's outside of Gaelic Ireland,
right?
Sam Hain,
it's Sam Hain,
I guess is the way to say it. But yeah, so it's this is the imagery of this Danzig skull I had on several things that I owned as a kid. I had 2 or 3 T-shirts that had this skull on it. I absolutely loved this imagery. And I remember when I first learned that Danzig pulled this from a comic book back when I was a kid, blew my mind. And I never could find the comic book itself. And Kapow Comics got their hands on one of them, and they know that Danzig, Glenn Danzig, I've followed his music forever, and it's some of my very favorite.
Right.
So they put this back for me, and I didn't want to pay the money for it, but I just couldn't help myself. I ponied up and bought it. I remember Krystar, the Crystal Warrior, as a kid. I do remember this character. And
it's a blind spot for me. I don't know anything about the character.
Well, you're not missing anything.
Okay.
I read this comic, and it's no wonder that this series didn't succeed. And it's not because the artwork is great. The pencils are by Ricardo Villamonte.
Mm-hmm.
Inks by Dave Simmons. The artwork is off the chart, but the story is so convoluted. Not many people in the age group that they're shooting for are going to be able to follow this story.
Right.
It's just way too convoluted. And the layouts in it, I'm like, the layouts were good. Then I noticed, I read the credit. Jim Shooter's the editor. This is the Jim Shooter era.
Okay.
So how much of that is on Jim Shooter's shoulders? I don't know. He's notorious for being very, very disliked by artists.
Oh, yeah,
because he's so rigid in his demands on how they do their jobs. So I don't know. Some of that I think is probably on Jim Shooter's shoulders, but the artwork is great. The artwork was great. It's just the overall writing's just so convoluted. Writing by Joe Duffy, which I read a ton of Joe Duffy stuff as a kid growing up and liked it. But this one was just a miss. Interestingly enough, one more thing about this issue, this is of course an issue from 1984, so it's got all the old advertisements in it. One standout thing that was advertised in this that stuck out like a sore thumb, one of these pages that's advertising, this Marvel Super Mart, how to be a slam dunker, how to go from skinny to winner, how to get muscles in 7 days, is an advertisement that says 40 brand new towels for $1.75. And then there's an address. You send in your $1.75 and you get 40 brand new towels. It makes sure and lets you know that these are not seconds. These are brand new, beautifully colored pastel towels. Super quality, it says.
Oh, pastel, you say?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What?
Really tapping into that gym teacher market there.
Yeah. Yes. They make sure and let you know they've already sold 70,000 of them.
Oh, where are those deals now? That's like Costco deals.
I mean, yeah, towels.
I wonder who. I see it. Yeah, you look at that stuff and you're like, I have so many questions.
Exactly.
Who? Why? How? Like, what happened here?
Yeah.
We've got to get an ad for us in a comic book at some point. That's got to happen.
Oh my gosh.
We've been in a magazine, but not a comic book. We got to put us in a comic book. Need it to happen.
Yeah.
I'm really glad you're enjoying the comic history of animation, because I know you, like you talked about that first issue when you tapped in. It would be great. And I forget, I know you just said it, but off the top of my head, I can't remember who is publishing those. I would love it if they would stick together like a hardcover with all the comic book history of stuff in it at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
IDWs. Who publishes
IDW,
that. Yeah.
Well, they do lots of hardcovers. I mean, so maybe it's coming. Because like I was thinking about the Sumerian. Like I'm getting the hardcovers of those as they come out too, and stuff like that just looks really great on the shelf.
Yeah.
Little snippets of things. It's fun to collect those. So
yeah.
All right. Well, you have succeeded in your task of putting me in the mood to talk about comics. I'm ready. You won. You won me over, man. So I've got a few books. Most of them, 2 out of 3 are relatively new. And one of them, I don't think I've spoken about it on the show before, but first and foremost, last week, a new addition to the ever-growing line of X-Men books came out that I really enjoyed, and I almost made this my book of the week. But I read another one that it got me where this one didn't. But X-Corp #1 came out, and this book, I'm going to borrow some phrasing just because I jacked up and heard. I was listening to another podcast. They were talking about it. But our buddy Vince Bonavilla from the 11 O'Clock Comics podcast, he said it, and it's absolutely true, and I can't say it any better, so I'm just going to borrow his saying. It doesn't walk or talk like an X book, but it's good. And it's true. So essentially the story behind this, if you haven't been keeping up with it or you didn't see the previews, this deals with the corporate side of the mutants. And so they've got essentially 2 CXOs, one of them being Monet, who's also Penance, and the other one being Angel, Warren Worthington III. And they're running the business side of things. Krakoa's got the flowers. If they heal everybody, they're profitizing it on a global market. And so it really is kind of like there is a twinge of humor from shows like The Office laced a little bit in this book, which I'm not a fan of that show, but there was just the right amount in this to make me happy and carry me through. But I mean, also, punching, fighting, and general X-Men type action sequences. So it was fun. So Teenie Howard is the writer of this. Alberto Foch is the artist. Sonny Go did the covers. Clayton Cowell on the letters. So yeah, I'm kind of in on this. I know you and Craig have, you guys have enjoyed most of the X line. I've really enjoyed about 30% of it, and this is one of them. So I'm gonna have fun with this. I can't wait to see where they go with it. Another book comes from our friends over at Image Comics, and this book is, I want to say I spoke about the first issue of it. It's called Post Americana. Steve Scroce, Dave Stewart. Actually, I think we did this as a roundtable, the first issue. We are now up to issue 5, and things have gotten weird in this book. So yeah, Wasteland, feuding factions, weird fascist group underneath the surface of the earth building robots. But our main character, who is this kind of half cyborg person, and the guy that she's running away with, who is was a saboteur of the fascist underneath the ground, they've escaped, and they've made it to what appears to be, I think it's supposed to be old Hollywood, or the remnants of Hollywood, and who they stumble upon is basically, I'm trying to think of the right way to put it. It's an animatronics person, or somebody who used to be an animatronics like lab, a workshop. And so what they stumble on are all these cartoon figures and all of these superhero props, AI, almost AI. They're programmed. They're not sentient, but they're being ran by something that's more than what he's seen. So half of the story is Steve Scroce ridiculousness, wasteland battles. I mean, Mad Max on meth, but all the while there's a little talking egg and a little talking pink elephant from a kid's show who are wholesome and just kind of out of place through the whole book, and it's hilarious. the book is irreverent as all hell, and I just love it. I love Scroshi, so that's been a fun one. And then last but certainly not least, from our friends over at Fantagraphics, I was actually sent this book. I didn't buy this book. I was sent it by our buddy Steve over from the Comic Book Bears podcast. It's called, and I don't think I've spoken about this on the show, so if I have, stop me. I'll grab another one. But it's called "I Never Promised You a Rose Garden" by Manny Murphy. And I'm not going to go into too much detail, but essentially the way this graphic novel works, it starts off with a story, kind of a retelling of Joaquin Phoenix's brother River Phoenix, about how he died, like the short stint of his life leading up to his death, in really centered in Portland, where he was living. He the book insinuates that he may or may not have done some sex work, trying to making it a struggling actor, also possibly with Keanu Reeves. But he was living with this avant-garde filmmaker at the time, and it really gets into a lot of that work very briefly in the front end. But where it goes from there, it turns into kind of a historical treatise on Portland, kind of telling you the origins of Portland, where it came from, and how and white supremacy is laced into the very being of that state of Oregon, and where it came from. And then it gets into like the neo-Nazis of the punk movement, a little bit of the era and the mentality that movies like American History X were based off of. Like, it starts talking about that, these radio personalities and the individuals that they inspired, some of which were, put on trial for murder, and it gets into some of the trial. So it was really more of like a stream of consciousness style graphic novel, just about the history of Portland that stems out of River Phoenix's death. And so it was interesting take. The book is made to look like it was done on notebook paper, but not just regular notebook paper, that kind of notebook paper that you give a kindergartner that has the little dashed line, so you can line your uppercase and your lowercase letters. The bottom half of each page is that, and it's handwriting. The top half is all gray wash. It's all of the art and the pictures in gray wash. So it's not a comic in the sense that these are not sequential panels per se, but each half page is a picture that kind of, it gives you a visage of what's happening in the story at that moment. So like when they're talking about, one of these murder trials, it's a gray wash portrait of somebody on the stand. When they're talking about the history of Oregon and the river towns popping up, it's to show, the little guy on a boardwalk with a net. So it's really impressionist. It's that kind of, not very, not realism at all, very much impressionistic, but it is, to my opinion, perfect in its imperfections, if that makes sense. Like a lot of Fantagraphics books are, they are not polished, but they are just kind of raw storytelling, and raw visual storytelling. And I really appreciated it. So, shout out to Steve. Thank you for sending me that book. Can't wait to talk to him about it over on their show, hopefully sometime in the near future, and really get into it. But it's fun. There's a lot to unpack in this book. So, Never Promised You a Rose Garden. So, nice.
Yeah.
Sounds like we had a good week reading.
Yeah, there was a lot of good stuff this week.
I actually ran through, I'd gotten backed up a little bit because of finals, and so I've done work. I've put in a hefty amount of page turning this week. I'm proud of me.
Yeah, nice.
One of the things I read this week, I read because of either you or Craig. One of you told me I had to. Essentially, is the way it works, because you guys, one of you got together and said, "Hey, this is our roundtable book, and you're going to read it." So I did, because that's what we do here. We force each other to read other things. It's not unlike a hostage situation. You can't get quiet when I say hostage situation, Matt.
Yeah. So success lies outside the comfort zone. That's what they say.
So the book that we got together to read as a roundtable, was it? I'm curious now. Was it you or Craig who picked this book?
I think I did. He and I were scanning the shelves together, and we came across this one. Justice League Last Ride from DC. This is number one. Came across, and we decided on this one because Chip Zdarsky is writing this one. So we're like, okay. Well, I've never read a Chip Zdarsky Justice League book before. Craig said he hadn't either. I'm like, well, let's give this one a try. So that's really what landed us on this one.
Well, I got to say, I think it was a win. I'm glad you guys picked this book out.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely.
I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed it because it kind of piggybacks on another book that I read this week that I'm going to tell you about later. But yeah, overall, this was a fun and interesting story. It kind of drops you into the middle of some situations that I wasn't entirely sure when they were happening, if that makes sense. So there's some context that as I was reading, I'm like, I don't really know where this book fits into the overall story of DC. But that wasn't necessarily a problem. Chip Zdarsky is a writer he's hit or miss for me. I know lately he's been way more hit than miss, but no, overall, I think it was a win. I really, really, really liked Miguel Mendoza's lines in here.
Oh yeah, the artwork's great. Artwork is great.
So that's just kind of my 30,000 foot view of the book. You got anything you want to add to that before we jump in and into it?
No, go ahead and jump into it. I'll hold my comments till the end.
Okay. So the way the story starts, essentially, I'm gonna do just kind of a brief overview of it without getting too much. Most of the story, it bases out of a conversation that Lois and Clark are having, and Lois is actually working on writing a book, and she's kind of sequestered herself into a writer's room inside inside the Superman's I went blank. Matt, help me out.
Fortress of Solitude.
Fortress of Solitude. Thank you. Could not think of the word fortress because haven't had enough coffee this morning. Mm-hmm. And so they're talking, and she's just like, "Look, is there anything I can do to help you? You just don't seem like yourself." And of course, he's playing it strong. He's like, "No, look, everything is fine. It's all good." And she's just like, for somebody who's all about truth and justice, you lied a lot, but you can't fool me. I know what's going on, because he does have some baggage. He's got some stuff he's holding on to, and it's weighing him down, and it's affecting him, because there's apparently been a lot going on in Superman's life, and it's a little bit of a mix between PTSD and just inadequacy. It's something that we all kind of struggle with, and are we good enough? And it's kind of crazy to think of Superman having that problem, but at the end of the day, he's a boy from Kansas, right? So he has to deal with that. And he wakes up in the middle of the night and he's having just this bad dream. He wakes up kind of screaming, and glad to know personally that Superman sleeps in the buff. That's a nice thing to add to my memory bank, because he does. He's waking up late and a little upset with the artist here who ruined what could have been an amazing portrait by sticking a sheet where it didn't need to be. We could have got an answer to a question we all need answered. But when he wakes up, his little Justice League pager beeper is going off, and he's got to get up to the watchtower. He's got to go find out what's going on. And as he gets up there, he meets Diana. She's waiting on things, and the Flash is kicking it around, and they start talking, and essentially they're just talking about who's around, and John, Green Lantern John has called this meeting to figure out what's going on. But there's a few key figures missing here, and one of them is Batman, and he finally shows up, but you can tell that there's a rift. There's something in between Clark and Bruce, and we don't really know what that is at this moment, or at least I don't. I didn't until you finish the story, because you kind of get a hint of what that's going to be. But things aren't all good, and these are two men who are supposed to be best friends. Like they are, they have their disagreements on how to do things, but at the end of the day, these are two men that they not only work together, but they love each other as people, and they have there's some bad blood, and they're not able to get over it. And this is kind of coming to a head, but eventually, they have to stop being squabbling children, because John shows up, and the reason he has called them there, and he shows up with a team. He's got Kilowog and he's got Jessica with him. The reason he shows up and the reason he called this meeting of the Justice League, despite all the drama and the whatever they've got causing rifts, is because they have a prisoner and they need to protect this prisoner kind of at all costs, because he's a bad dude, and that prisoner is none other than Lobo. They have managed to capture Lobo, and they are going to turn him over into the, basically the universal government, the Galactic Empire, for punishment. But here's the thing about Lobo. Lobo has pissed off a universe full of people, and there's a lot of people that want the main man dead, and so they need a place to kind of stash him, to store him until they can get him turned over to the United Planets. And everybody and their brother thinks this is a bad idea, but they can't. Hal Jordan gets called in on this, and he's trying to figure out what's going on. Superman's trying to figure out where to keep him safe. Diana's on board. She's just like, this seems like it's going to cause problems, but why not? But Bruce is not having it. He's just like, this isn't my thing. This is, he calls it, this is cosmic politics. People in Gotham need me to help out, which, for me, I'm reading this and I'm like, it's always funny when Bruce's attitude pops up in a Justice League story, because, then when the action starts, Bruce is usually kind of useless because he's just a dude who fights crime with money. I was like, but like this is where they need you the most. They need your brain. They need your strategic sensibilities, and you're just going to walk off. And they know he knows what to do. Like, Superman calls him on it. He's like, they've been racking their brain trying to keep this dude safe, and I can tell by the look in your face, you've already solved it. Like, why you're leaving us high and dry, man? Like, quit being a dick. But Bruce is just like, nah, like, good luck with it. And he goes back to Gotham, and Gotham is doing Gotham things. Mr. Freeze is running amok, causing problems. Interestingly enough, Alfred is alive, and I picked up on that, and I'm sure you did too, Matt. And this is what kind of threw me off as far as the where and when of this story. But he's talking to Alfred, and Alfred's supposed to be dead in main continuity, unless I just missed where they brought him back very quietly.
No, this to as far as I can tell, this story is, I guess you would just call it an Elseworld story, but seems to happen sometime after Crisis of Infinite Earth.
Right. That makes sense. So it threw me off a little bit, and well, I'll tell you why it threw me off later. Because there are some things that this book actually mentions into that could fit into current continuity. But again, that's just part of the magic of, you're not supposed to know exactly where this goes. And it is going to kind of be an Elseworlds tale, which kind of, regardless, no matter what, it's nice to see Alfred back. I really wish that, and I remember when Alfred first got taken off the board, like, we all were like, yeah, that, and it was a problem. That was in Tom King's run of Batman, but they still haven't brought him back. So there was this big thing, like, is this Tom King doing this, or is this editorial? And who knows? And I think it could be a little bit of both, but I found it interesting that they still haven't brought him back, even though they have new people running the Bat wheelhouse. So they're letting that stay down. So eventually, like all comic book characters, I think they're probably going to bring Alfred back. But it sure was nice to see him, and it was good to see that relationship on the page again, because I miss Alfred's presence in those books so much. But regardless, they're solving crimes. Mr. Freeze is doing his thing, but Superman's not going to let that little argument, that tiff that they had. He's not going to let it lie. Like, he shows up in Gotham to kind of, snap Bruce back into reality, to just talk some sense into him, to try to work things out. And I don't want to spoil what the rift is between them, because at the end of the book, you do find out, and it's serious business. Like, it's big doings. And I think that what it is I think that does lead the way to what Matt said, is about this being an Elseworlds tale, because something major has happened that has caused the rift, but they got to figure it out. And so what Bruce, at the end of the day, what he comes to terms with is that he is going to help them, and the best place for them to go, the one place that they can keep Lobo safe until they can turn him over to into like the the Planet Police or whatever they're calling themselves, the United Planets, is Apocalypse. So they are going to the throne world of, Darkseid, the biggest, baddest place possible to keep him safe. And that sounds like it's going to be insane. So I can't wait to see where they pick up and go into in the second issue.
Yeah, I'm in for this one.
Right.
I'm really looking forward to see where this goes. And I've been wanting a really good Justice League story for a long time.
Right.
And just none have been out there that I've really liked.
Yep.
This one I really dug. I like, Superman. First of all, Superman sleeping in the buff. Kansas boys don't sleep naked. That is a major that's a major fail. Kansas boys do not sleep naked. So somebody needs to be corrected on that. I don't know whose agenda this is, but outside of that faux pas,
it's a win, is what it is.
Yeah,
it's a win for us all. Actually, it's a win for Lois. It's a win for Lois more than anything.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Lois is sleeping in a nightie and a top, and Superman's in the buff. This is just mistakes. But anyway, outside of that shallowness, I love the layouts in this book. I really liked the artwork in this book. Superman, I really appreciated Superman's character in this book. He's obviously, the conscience of the group. Yeah. Batman's role was right on target. He's the brains of the outfit. I mean, that is what he does in the Justice League.
And he does it while brooding the whole time.
Yeah. And I really appreciate the brooding, obstinate, Batman. That's that part of his character I really enjoy. He's not a team player guy, so I really like when they show him. He's like he's functioning as part of this team, but he doesn't like playing on a team. And if he's going to be in charge. I really dig when that is brought out in Batman, because it's so in line with the kind of character that he is. So I was all about the way that he showed up and conducted himself at the meeting. And then, of course, Superman had to go back and appeal to him. And, of course, he comes back around because, again, Superman's the conscience of the group, and he's just too nice of a guy for Bruce to say no to for too many times in a row.
Right.
So I really appreciated that. All the characterizations were great. This felt like a classic Justice League story. And that's what I miss so much, of these classic representations of the character. The most interesting part of Justice League story, like with any of these superhero teams, is not the fights that they have, the existential threats. It's the interactions between the characters that's what makes the story for me. That's why, for example, this Justice League, this metal storyline that's going on right now, it's just, I could not care less about that. It's just another story where the Justice League is fighting a giant cosmic threat, and the interaction between the characters feels as cookie cutter as it can be. It's all about this giant cosmic battle, and not about the interactions of the team. So, getting that out of this book is what I liked the most. This is a big hit for me, and it's, that's saying something, because it's hard for me to get on board with a Justice League story, but I'm on board for this one.
Well, and I 100% agree with you. So I've been waiting on a good Justice League story again for a long time, because I do like these characters, and there's been a lot of great Justice League stories in the past. You think of, half of them have been written by Jeff Johns, and that's some of the writing of Jeff Johns that I really do enjoy. And I think we've talked about this before. And I'm not about to besmirch Jeff Johns by any means. I'm not saying that at all. I wish I loved Jeff Johns the way that other DC fans love Jeff Johns. It's just different strokes for different folks. I recognize his talent and know why he's great. There's a lot of his stories that don't do it for me, which is a shame, because everybody else loves the guy, and I recognize I am missing something and maybe someday it'll click. It just hasn't yet. But certainly in the past, recently you've got Scott Snyder. His Justice League has not been great. Christopher Priest's Justice League was not great. I didn't enjoy either one of those, which and I think that kind of ties into some of what you're talking about with Metal. I can't say that so I read the first Metal. I didn't read Death Metal or any of the tie-ins. I'm not a Snyder fan. Like I'm just not. I liked like 2.5 of his Batman stories, like the first 2.5 arcs and like one in the middle. I found compelling and interesting. I thought were cool when he was doing the New 52 stuff. I'm not a fan. And so for those people who love what he's doing, they like the balls to the wall, bonkers, craziness of Metal. That's great. Like I'm glad for you. I like it when people like things. I love it. I'm a huge fan of Greg Capullo, so I can look at the pages and be happy. At the end of the day, like Big Poppy is the man for me. Like I love what that dude lays down, and so at the end of the day, like there's some good to come out of that. But this really felt like it filled a hole in the DC universe that I've been missing. As far as like the uniting the teams, and I'm a team dude, right? Like we've had this conversation when it comes to either of the big two universes. I think you need to have a strong Justice League book. I think it trickles down. If you have a strong Justice League book, a lot of times, like whatever storyline that they're doing, that's going to flow into the rest of the continuity and the rest of the world. The same is true, in my opinion, of Marvel. Like, when the Avengers are good, a lot of other things in the books are good. Like that's just kind of the way it works for me, in my opinion. And that's not saying that there aren't outliers or there aren't plenty of examples of when solo books are great. Because there's solo books that are great right now when largely the two team books haven't been big. But I think it does better for I think it serves the publishers better when their flagship team books are just clicking. They're hitting on all cylinders when you've got your best talent on those and they're making things happen, because then people can, you don't need events to tie in the solo books. You can just have team books and things happening in those books that works out for the best. And I miss that. I also found it interesting in this book. You're talking about it felt like a classic story. Did you notice who wasn't in the story?
Who were we missing? Martian Manhunter? Somebody else?
Cyborg. Cyborg is not in the story, and they have done that I found interesting, because DC has been trying for almost a good 10 years now to really make Cyborg like fit in to be a major part of the Justice League. In the books, in the Justice League cartoons, I was actually kind of surprised when they put him in the Teen Titans show. They're trying to really make him fill in a spot on the Justice League, but the movies are everything else. He wasn't in this book. And I don't know if that was Chip just wanting to tell a different kind of story, or if, or what they wanted this just to be those classic characters, your OG Justice League, if you will, the core.
Well, it also kind of felt like this is the very beginning of this story. Like, you essentially, it felt like the team leadership was coming together. So It wouldn't surprise me if he comes in later on that note. Well,
do you think?
Obviously, we'll see. Especially since they're going to Apocalypse,
right? But they obviously they know the threat of Apocalypse, right? Like it seems to me that they would have to know what Apocalypse is. You kind of have to know what the threat of Apocalypse is. So, and there's enough there for there to be that relationship. So, and that's one of those things. Like I said, I don't know where they fit in, but it definitely seems like it's at least a resurgence in both in the metatextual, our real world kind of a resurgence of the Justice League, but also maybe just getting back together in there to where it comes out with. But it's been enough time where Hal Jordan is he's doing his thing, and you've got John who's also been a part. So they've been established for a little bit, but I don't know. I really enjoyed this. I would like to see more Diana, just because that's my girl. She's my favorite DC character by far. So I would like to see them use more for her. I would also. I'm curious. Do you think that this Flash is this Barry or Wally?
I was trying to figure that out. I mean, it feels like it's Barry.
I thought so. There was that one image, and it could have just been a coloring thing. There's one image where you really can't tell if he's got red hair or he's got blonde hair, or like brownish hair. So, and they never say him by his first name. So that was a question that I had. I would kind of like to know that. And I think you're probably right. I think it is Barry. It's funny if there's this one panel, the exact panel I'm talking about, where you can't really tell what color his hair is supposed to be. He's eating a bag of chips, and it's called Chip Max from Chip Zdarsky, because he's Chip. So, all in all, like from the opening page to where he's, I guess, you know, if you look at the opening page, it's Superman fighting, you know, going from the most amazing thing, you know, fighting Doomsday, to rescuing a couple of kids out of a burning building. Just I think Chip nailed these characters, each and every one. Like you said, he just gets it. Although I will say in that second panel in the book, I'm not crazy about the trail he's leaving behind as he's coming out of the burning building. He looks like Cannonball from the X-Men. But they rectified that later on in the book when they showed the blur, the blue and red blur behind him. So, you know,
what are you looking forward to the most as the story goes on?
I want to see if Chip. I want to see if Chip can bring in any new gods, or what he's going to do with that. I like the lanterns that he shows, so I'm hoping that there's some stuff in that, because I like Jessica. I think Jessica's a Green Lantern's a really cool character. They've played a little bit with her. I forget exactly what year she was invented. I think it was like something like 5 years ago. So possibly, maybe more than that. Maybe 2012, 2011. I want to see if he plays with Jessica any. John Stewart's a great Lantern, but really I want to see Apocalypse. I want to see what he does with that character. I'm actually hoping that he pumps the brakes on how much humor he puts in to Lobo. So and this may be somewhere, I don't know, we haven't really had this conversation where you and I kind of read things differently. I like Chip's humorous stuff a lot less than I like when he's being serious. And I don't know why. That's just always been the case. And I'm not a fan of comedy. I mean, we've talked about that. Like, you know, I don't like comic TV shows. I don't like comedic movies, really, other than just a few of them. I would be perfectly happy if Will Ferrell never made another funny movie again, just because I don't think he's funny at all. That's just not my cup of tea, so to speak. And that's true for his writing. Like, you know, I've tried to read into and some other stuff he works on, and I think some of that, you know, you can talk about sex criminals, but part of that was Fraction too. And long story short, yeah, when he's being serious and broody like he does in the Daredevil work, that is Chip that I really like. When he tells the kind of, when he can really dial in his jokes, like he did, you know, a while back in Marvel 2-in-1. I think you read that. I'm not sure if you did or not, but it was, you know, it was Ben and Johnny trying to figure out where Sue and Reed were after Hickman sent them off into space. That was a really good book, and his writing for comedy for The Thing was fun, but he wasn't so heavy-handed, and he almost hit that sweet spot. So if he can do that with Lobo, I'll be happy. But I'm really afraid he's going to go full Zdarsky and chuckle fuck it up, so to speak.
I'm looking forward to. I want to see how he writes the the Apocalypse characters. I really look forward to seeing how he writes Darkseid, Granny Goodness, Desaad, just all of the Apocalypse Fourth World characters. I'm really looking forward to see how Zdarsky writes that whole setting.
He better have Granny Goodness with the cosmic dildo. I'm gonna call him a punk if he doesn't.
Well, given we're talking about the sex criminals guy, if it's not in there, it's because editorial told him you couldn't do it. That's what my money says.
Jack Kirby gave her a cosmic dildo for a reason. The god spoke it. Let no man take it away.
Yeah.
No, I don't know that I've ever. Has he ever written any of the Fourth World characters before?
I don't. I mean, if he has, it's completely, you know, missed my radar. I mean, I don't think so. I've not been made aware that he has.
I haven't either. So I'll be curious to see what he does with them.
Oh gosh, I'm really looking forward to it.
I want to see him go back to the Batcave too. There's a really funny moment in this book where where Superman gets pissed off at Bruce and flips the coin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of fun in this book, and I really, I mean, it's encouraging to see what he's done with this first issue. So we're gonna see where it goes. I'm in for the long haul, and I think this is probably going to be another one of those 6-issue series. It doesn't say, but it feels like it's going to be a mini series.
Yeah. Well, it'd be nice, as much as I've been on for Chip Zdarsky's Marvel work, it would be nice if he were to do some more DC stuff on a regular basis, because I mean, in my opinion, I think the DC universe could use a talent like Zdarsky right now. So we'll just see. I'm not holding my breath, but it would be nice.
Well, I mean, we know we've got him for a few issues at least. So yeah. I agree with you talking about DC, and this is just a general thing. On their main books, especially, like I'm like Tynan's Batman just is lackluster to me. Gorgeous art, I'll say that for the most part. Like he's getting some really great artistic work done, kind of breaking the mold with the art as far as like this manga influenced vibe to it. But I'm just not tapping in Superman. Tapping into his Batman stuff. I haven't read any of his Superman stuff in a long time. I know Tom Taylor, is it Tom that's writing it, or is it? They announced a new. Oh, it was the guy who he did that big fantasy series from a while back, Kennedy something. He's going to take over Superman. So I haven't read any of the Bendis Superman stuff. But that being said, I'm really digging like the Swamp Thing book right now. Wonder Woman has had Becky Cloonan on it. Not feeling that so much, but I think that they've got some strong corners of the book of that universe. It's just not in their keys, which is kind of what we were talking about a while ago. If you don't have a strong team book, maybe there's some influence and some trickle down effect on the individual stories. But who can say whether or not that's true or not? What are your favorite DC books right now?
Well, I mean, this Tom Taylor Batman the Detective, Tom Taylor, Adam Kubert. I mean, of course, we're only 2 issues in, but I'm loving this one. The main Batman title, I don't even know how to feel about it anymore. I really don't. The artwork is outstanding. The storyline, I mean, it feels like the storyline has got, and this is just total speculation, but it feels like editorial is really driving the direction of the story.
Yeah, every other issue is introducing a new character.
I'm just like, what is going on here? Yeah. I mean, it's become, Ghostmaker has hijacked the book in a lot of ways. That's really I'm not digging. But that's really I've dropped so much DC stuff over the past 2 years. I think that's all I'm down to reading. I mean, I picked up the first issue of the Joker series. It was good. I missed the second issue. That the Ram V, and I forget the artist, but the Swamp Thing story.
Mike Perkins, yeah.
Mike Perkins, yeah. It's a good story, but it's just I'm not really digging it because of the way they're treating this Swamp Thing character. I don't really like the way they're doing that. It's interesting. I'll give them points for being creative and good storytelling, but it's just not my preference. I guess that's the best way. The Alec Holland Swamp Thing being the Green as a whole and not a person. I'm not digging the way this story is going. Like this guy turns into the Swamp Thing.
Right.
I was like, I mean, it just feels that's where it feels like the character is taking a step backwards because when Alan Moore did what he did with the Swamp Thing, it gave a whole new look to the character. I mean, now the Swamp Thing is an elemental. He is, as Alan Moore wrote, Batman says, he is as close to a god as there is on this planet.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now, we've got this guy who it turns back into another monster story, werewolf, analog. And
it's funny because it as I'm reading it, because I'm like, that's one of my favorite, as we're talking about our favorite DC stories right now. It's more in line with like the Floronic Man and Poison Ivy.
Yeah.
Like that's more so. And so, yeah, when I first read it, I was like, because we were talking about it, I was like, yeah, that's weird. They're taking that away, from Alec Holland, where his, his body was not, it was just what made him human was the drive to be human, but there was nothing human left of him. This guy is human, but he's more in line with, like I said, Poison Ivy or with Woodrue, and which I like. I think that's an interesting take on it. And Mike Perkins to me is doing a bang up job of drawing that book. In the most recent issue, I will say what kind of piqued my interest the most is I think they're actually tying this into the quote unquote future state series that they did, which I loved. I thought that was beautiful. And so I think that's kind of where we're going with it. So it's a neat take. Like I'm impressed, like you said, that they're doing their own thing, and I'm in for the ride. I would say for me, the other two books, like I can do it like a top three, are Detective Comics. I think that's really good right now, and Mariko Tamaki's writing that. It's been fun. And then they're doing that Superman Red and Blue, a book, which I don't know if you're grabbing, but it's kind of like it's the same idea as Wolverine Red, White, and Blue, or Red, White, and Blood, or Batman Black and White, but it's Superman Red and Blue with these little mini stories, these 8-pagers, which is it's all you've got your 3 primary colors.
I've not seen that.
It's fun. Especially if you don't care about ongoing Superman stuff and you just want little snippets into his life, little short one-shotters. It's a fun story, fun book. I guess you'd call it an anthology, even though, I mean, technically, I guess it is an anthology. But when I think of anthologies, I typically think of like broad characters and different stories. These are all centered on Superman, but still worth the money to pick them up. So it's fun times.
Yeah.
Well, tell me about something else you read this week, brother.
So my book of the week, I'm going to talk about. This is from Image. This is issue 1 of volume 2 of Hey Kids Comics. This is a series by Howard Chaykin. So he's the writer and the artist on this book. The colorer is Yen Nitro. For anybody that doesn't know, this Hey Kids Comics series is Howard Chaykin's, I guess you would call it a fictionalized take on the history of comic books in America. And what I mean by fictionalized is, so he uses analogs for real life character people. And he does that to protect who he's talking about from a certain degree, because, the story of the history of comic books in this country, that you read is
cutthroat.
It's told by the people that were there. It's very business-like and surface level. What this dives into is behind the scenes and what was going on in the actual lives of the people that were involved, and the things that these people were going through, and the things that a lot of people were saying were pretty ugly. So he has these analogs for real people to protect them. And so that this issue gets to the point of the Kefauver trials, and whenever in the 50s, at the end of World War II, a lot of comic book sales were driven by the war. So the war ends and comic book sales start to take a dive. At the same time, the trials are going on, the public trials, that is, where comic books are being blamed for juvenile delinquency. So everybody feels, that there's a pivot that has to go on. And, we've all heard and learned about that. But what this talks about is the attitudes of the people that were in the comic book business. Like, what can we, if we can't talk about, we can't talk about crime or horror, what can we talk about? So they just start trying out, Westerns, romance, of course, then you get into the superhero vibe, and they're just throwing everything against the wall to see what sticks. And the people that were involved were really unhappy. They were pissed. They're like, I don't want to draw this. This sucks. I mean, we're making these stories for, we're supposed to be making these more adult stories, but our audience is not adult. I mean, unless we're talking about idiots, that's the way that these, a lot of people saw the market. And, so it's a really interesting take on what the actual attitudes of the people involved were. The discrimination involved against women in the industry, against African Americans in the industry. So I've really enjoyed this series for that reason, getting the behind the scenes dirt, I guess you would say. And that the people that were doing this, by and large, are not doing this because they're passionate about telling stories. They're doing it. It's just a job.
It's a placeholder.
It's just a job. It's just a job, and it's one that they don't necessarily really like in so many instances. They're constantly unhappy in the work that they do, but this is the craft that they know, and it's all they've ever done, and they're stuck in a rut.
Yeah.
But they have bad attitudes about it. There's some standouts that do not. It's not like everybody's portrayed as being miserable. There's some that are like, well, no, this isn't bad. No, this is okay. And these coworkers are like, are you nuts? This is trash. I mean, it's that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And they don't trust, they don't trust management. They don't like who they're working for. They feel taken advantage of, which, if the history of comic books has proven anything, is that the creators were taken advantage of.
Absolutely.
Not given their proper due. So if you have any interest in that kind of thing and learning the more human impact, the individual human impact and outlook on the comic book history in this country, it's one that I recommend. I would not recommend doing is really spending a lot of time trying to figure out who the analog for each character is. Like, oh, I wonder if this is Stan Lee. Is he talking about Stan Lee? Ooh, I wonder if this is Jack Kirby. You're going to kind of drive yourself crazy doing that. So I wouldn't recommend doing that.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, there's like one character in this story will represent an entire, stable of artists.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah.
For example, yeah. The woman, there's a woman artist in here. She represents women artists in general, not, a particular woman artist, and so on.
Yeah, there are people. So I actually had a chance to moderate a panel with Howard Chaykin a few years ago, and he was talking about this book, and that's exactly what he said. If the characters in this book are fictionalized characters. Some of them are discussing real moments, but most of them, a lot of them, are conglomerates of real people that I just took several personalities and tried to cram them into one person or to one figure for what the moment calls for. And I think that's smart, because like you said, you're able to do the work that you need the book to do. And I will say about that, I went into that interview only knowing like the Howard Chaykin of comic book kind of lore, this curmudgeonly old man. And I walked off that stage, and I respected him because of who he was, and I respected him because of the work. But, a lot of times it's like, okay, this is just a bitter old guy. I walked off that stage respecting Howard Chaykin more than I kind of hold him on a pedestal now. Because he was able to really, what it boils down to is his anger at the infantilization of comics, or of mainstream comics. And I, while I might not necessarily always agree with what he says, he comes from a place of experience, and he can back up his points with, anecdotal and data. And so like the arguments that he makes are well thought through. and at the end of the day, they're just something that he dreams of. He wants to see the comic book medium thrive. And he's the point that he made doing that panel when we were talking about books like, like Hey Kids, and we were talking about the Divided States of America, which is some of his more contemporary work that caused a lot of issues, is people don't take time to read the subtext in comics anymore, and that's because of largely like 50 years of infantilizing comics. I mean, that's part of the reason why people can, read eras, hundreds of X-Men comics and still walk away not actually understanding that this is a metaphor for bigotry. Or they can read, any number of, you can be a racist and watch Star Trek. It's the infantilization of pop culture media, which has hurt pop culture media. And I think he explores it a lot. Now, I haven't read I haven't read this. I've read all but the last issue of the first volume. And so I need to pick it up, but I have such a profound level of respect for his commentary on the media. It's kind of like when Ed Brubaker talks about the comic book medium too. It's like, it doesn't matter if you agree with him or not, you shut the fuck up and listen. Right. It's just, yeah.
But he's been doing it for a long time. He did some stand-ins for John Buscema back in the Conan the Barbarian run.
Mm-hmm.
He was working in Neil Adams' studio for a while. So he has seen and heard a lot in the history of comic books in this country. So, him writing this kind of story, when I first heard about it, I was really excited about it because he's just seen and heard so much,
right,
as the industry as it has evolved.
Well, I think it's important that more of these stories come out. I mean, as we hear, we know about like what happened to Bill Finger, but we know about that through documentaries. We know about that through essays that people have written outside of the comics medium. But tell the stories in the comics medium. We know, like Steve Ditko. The same is true of Kirby. Jim Robinson, in a lot of ways, has that same story, and just a multitude of others. Like you said, the women in comics who didn't get their due and proper, the fame and the money that they should have gotten. It was largely sucked up by the personalities of the men in the room, and even those men didn't get their due and proper half the time because of management. So I like that the stories are being told in the comics medium, because I think that's an important way to get the people who need to see it and who would appreciate it the most, to get them to understand it.
On the flip side, though, if people that make heroes out of these old writers and artists, it's gonna it humanizes people.
Right.
So if you've made a hero out of Jack Kirby, if you made a hero out of Stan Lee, I mean, this is going to take the shine off that, because I mean, they're human beings,
right?
And
they're imperfect.
And every human being has got their own hangups and imperfections and quote unquote hot takes. So if you've turned these people into heroes, then this is going to rub you the wrong way. You got to be ready for a little bit of reality.
Right. And that's the thing, is like, I used to be one of those people. Like I was absolutely, and to some regard I still am, I think. Like I know everything about Stan Lee, or heard all the stories. I can't say that I know, obviously wasn't there, and nobody really knows, but we can speculate. But I know who Stan Lee was. Like you've heard the story, but I still think of him as a great, he's Stan Lee, but I don't have nearly I'm now willing to accept the fact that he was human because of works like this, because of listening to storytellers and listening to people who were actually there, and reading the articles. And at some point we have to realize that that's okay for them to be human, and we can still have respect for them, and we can still admit that they had flaws, and especially in such a niche industry, where when somebody does something stupid in real time, you can make that decision for yourself. But all those men are dead for the most part. Who do we have left over from that era? I mean, Roy Thomas is one of the last people from the early Silver Age.
Roy Thomas, of course, we're talking about him. Howard Chaykin,
Yeah.
Neil Adams.
Like that's, and I guess that would even be Silver Age, where that'd be more Bronze Age, late Silver, early Bronze Age artists, and it's most of those guys aren't still around, so it's okay to still think of them as human. So I really appreciate that these stories are being told, and like I said, it took me literally getting an experience that I don't think obviously most people don't get to have, but it took me going to a small convention and taking the time to sit with a guy like Howard Chaykin and to talk to him, to hear him, for him to turn me on to some essays I should go read, and to listen to him and to ask questions and be willing to hear him out, and to laugh at the fact that at the end of the day he is kind of just a curmudgeonly old man. But it took me that to finally, like, I felt like that was that moment where I grew up that day. I was like, okay, yeah, like these are nuanced things, and you need to set your fanboy drive aside if you're going to be that person. Does that make sense?
Sure,
like, yeah, grow up a little bit, and I did in that moment, and I really appreciated it.
Yeah, it's good.
So, have you ever read any of the Blackhawk stuff?
I have not.
I need to. That's on my list of things I've got to pour through and read. I felt so bad for Craig in that moment, because Craig's one thing is Star Wars. Like, Craig is in love with Star Wars, everything. The man has 2 Darth Vader tattoos. The one book that Howard Chaykin laments having written, like hates that he had anything to do with, is Star Wars. And he wrote Star Wars #1 for Marvel. Absolutely fucking hates it. Like, doesn't like talking about it. Will sign it, but he like charges people extra to sign it just because he didn't get paid for it. It was one of those things, exactly like the work you're talking about. Like, he's like, no, I made this. I brought this thing into life in the world of comics that really expanded that universe. I didn't get shit for it. Fuck me.
Well, and he openly admits that it's like some of his worst work.
Right. It's not good. Like, he's like, I'm ashamed of that I wrote that. So, and I think Craig knew that going in, but still, it hurt Craig's heart to hear him say that out loud.
Oh man.
I mean, that would just, and I can just imagine, like, like that would be, if I ever walked up to Herb Trimpe when he was still alive and was just like, oh no, fuck, I hated those Hulk pages. I was like, no, you don't. You shut your mouth.
Yeah. Rewind. Try that again.
Well, you got anything? I totally didn't mean to cut you off in that conversation, brother. You got it? Did I?
No.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So the book I was going to talk about, and it's going to tie in a little bit in interesting ways to what the Roundtable book is, Green Lanterns #2. I'm not a Green Lanterns like long-term fan. Obviously I read it when I jumped into Green Lanterns. I read little short stories here and there. Jumped on it when that first season or first volume of the Morrison run, and God help me, I'm committing sins, but the one good thing about that book as it ended was the artwork, and I, for the life of me, can't think of who did the art on that book.
Liam Sharp.
Okay, it was Liam Sharp. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So the Morrison Liam Sharp stuff kind of brought me back into it, but when I saw that they were kind of redoing things again with different teams, because I did not enjoy. I can't say I didn't enjoy. I didn't understand. I was not able to comprehend what was happening at the end of the Morrison Sharp run. But they were redoing Green Lantern with the new team, so I thought, okay, let me jump on #1 and see what's happening. And I really enjoyed the first one because they cast a wide net, and it brought me into some of the tangential characters that and love. And the book has been written by Jeffrey Thorne. It's got artwork. This particular issue has 2 different artists on it, and you can really tell when that second artist kicks on. You can tell there's a big difference in the style, but it's Dexter Stoy, who I'm a big fan of, and Marco Santucci, who did a great job, very, very much. I think juxtaposed Dexter Stoy, didn't do him any favors, but he's serviceable in his own right. I can't say anything bad about it. Alex Sinclair did the colors, Rob Lee did the letters. And so, yeah, I grabbed just a regular cover of this, which was Bernard Chang and Alex Sinclair. Really, really enjoyed the first issue. So the second issue is where the rubber really hits the road and what they're going to do with this series. John, the book opens up with John Stewart, and he's addressing every single lantern, like all of them across the board. He's talking to them all because Oa has been attacked, and so what's happening here is Oa and the Green Lanterns were doing. They're trying to do, like, their goal is make the universe a safer place, and I think the Guardians realized at some point that part of that means that they have to be a little bit more democratic in their methods. They have to have some diplomacy as instead of just being the iron hand of the universe. And so they had petitioned and were successfully added to the this kind of the United Planets, this conclave of almost kind of like the Jedi, the Galactic Council in Star Wars. This governmental hub, so to speak, kind of like the United Nations. And part of that means that they had to do some give and take. But while that was going on, they were attacked, and it's these people that were coming in under the guise of being like Blue Lanterns, this alien race, staged a series of terrorist attacks and really rocks the Lanterns to the core. To have their home planet attacked and hurt, physically hurt. They lost soldiers, they lost Lanterns while they were doing this act of diplomacy. Didn't help matters any. While the big attack was going on, the terrorists tried to do a sucker punch attack, and they sent this kind of galactic dragon to wreck shop. And the kind of your core group of Lanterns, the honor guard, stepped up to handle that situation. Well, while all this was going on, it was a distraction. The biggest blow of all happened, and one of the Guardians was killed, which is, that's, the Guardians are not people. The Guardians are something else. They're almost like fourth dimensional beings. And so where this book opens up with is John Stewart having to tell everybody what's happened. It's like, hey, like, our planet got attacked. We're part of this group now, and I don't know what that means. So, we expect changes, but at the end of the day, like, all that gets set aside for right now. Put on your best regalia, because today we are burying a Guardian. We're burying like one of the seven, one of our gods, so to speak. And what they do, or what they're doing here, is they're going to put the body of the Guardian into the giant ring, the power source of Oa, of all the Guardians. And it's very much this idea of of the first, what is it, the first law of physics, energy is neither created nor destroyed, it's just transformed. It's very much in that vein. And one of the Guardians, this who takes on the visage of a woman, Nemosini, I think is what she's called. She gives just this incredibly well delivered, and I mean, obviously the credit has to go to Jeffrey Thorne, but this incredibly thoughtful and empathetic eulogy to this fallen Guardian as they're sending his body away. I'm not joking. It's been a long time since I got a little, dusty eyed while reading a superhero comic. Like, it's genuinely that good. Like, I'm kind of like, oh, I'm going to write this down. Somebody needs to say this shit at my funeral someday. And at the end of the day, she's just like, he's going to the place that he's going to be transformed. He's going to become part of the power of the universe. You people out there, the Lanterns, you guys are mammals. Some of you are amphibians. You're these different types of life forms. Guardians were none of that. We're not quite gods, but we're something completely different. We will see our brother again one day. Just impeccably moving, but just to hit the nail home, right after the funeral. The Guardians, they're not going to waste any time, right? Like, they're not burying the lead with what they're doing. They got business to attend to and work to do. So just like the Lanterns haven't had time to catch their breath before she just knocks them back off their feet again. And she turns around just at the funeral, and she's like, look, there's some things that you guys need to know. Part of us being put into this governmental body, this universal entity, is we had to give up some things. to stand equally with the other world, we had to give up some power. They are cutting off, making obsolete 1,200 different sectors. And, each of these sectors is guarded by a guardian. So now 1,200 lanterns are out there, don't know what to do. That's a lot of people. And, the generals, in the hierarchy are like, hey, you didn't tell us this, but we need some time to get our administration going. Like, we got to have time to fix these changes. And she's just like, no, you don't. Like, this wasn't a thing. This is done. You're all going to get orders sent to your ring now. Like, we're starting with a blank slate. This is not a rollout. This is the deal. And so, like, the lanterns, as they're all kind of gathering around, they're just hit with this information. Their rings start going off. Some of them are just like, hey, your sector's defunct. Report to so and so to get figure out what you do. You're going to a different place. You're going to be an outrider. You're going on a quest. There's a number of things, and the rings aren't being specific. And so there's a lot of turmoil in the ranks, right? And John Stewart, he's standing there with just kind of everybody. He's standing there with Hal Jordan, Kilowog, Guy Gardner's kicking it. Kyle somewhere. Simon Baz is out there, kind of doing a babysitter job with this new, the Teen Lantern. I don't know if you're familiar with the Teen Lantern story, but the Teen Lantern, her name is Kelly, but she's not actually a Green Lantern. Like, she is either made and I'm not familiar with the history of it. She's got this gauntlet which gives her Green Lantern powers, but it's not connected to the source, right? Like, it's not connected to the battery on Oa. It's just its own thing. And so he's kind of babysitting her. They want to look at the gauntlet, but she's not letting anybody get close. And so like, there's dissension in the ranks, so to speak, because all of these lanterns are trying to figure out what they're going to do now. And I mean, you've got guys like Gardner, who is just a hothead, and he's just like those little blue fucks because they're sending him someplace he doesn't want to know. And but John Stewart, he's the Marine in John Stewart kicks in. I mean, really kicks in. He turns to his people, like, you've been given your orders. I expect you to follow them. You stay here. But he goes up to, to quote unquote talk to the brass, if you will. And he's talking to the guard. He's like, do you think that was the best way to handle it? You guys couldn't have just given some folks some time. I mean, these people gave up their lives, their families. Some of them haven't seen their home planets in years to do this. And you spring this on them. And the Guardians are like, hey, look, sometimes you just got to rip the Band-Aid off. But this is a volunteer organization. These people can, if they don't like it, they can quit. They can go home. But they answered the call. So, if they need to drop out, they can. The ring will choose somebody else. But they also need to just pause for the cause for a minute. Like, a lot of these people who are being sent on a quest and stuff, they don't know what's happening. And so we're going to actually tell you right now what's happening and give you the full details so you can disseminate this. You can be the general that you need to be. There are areas out in the universe which are blocked off from their sight. And the Guardians kind of take a minute to explain, have you ever wondered why Earth has produced like seven lanterns from a place where there was none, where it went from being unimportant in the universe to like where everybody was shocked where Hal Jordan showed up. Everybody nobody knew what to do with a human being a lantern. But in the past, some odd decades, you've produced 7 of them. It's because Earth is one of 7 planets, which are, they're called crux planets. They're the key to the universe. Like, these 7 planets do what needs to be done to ensure that galactic and cosmic life goes on forever. And that's why, but 2 of those planets were destroyed, and they kind of go into what happened a little bit, some of that backstory. And so you've got to trust us because we can see into the secrets of the universe in ways that you can't. And part of in doing that, part of the thread that comes with that and why so many new lanterns have shown up is because there's these areas of space that we're blocked off from. Something is purposely keeping us from seeing them. And we're sending you plus 1,000 other lanterns to go break through this kind of source wall, which not the same source wall that you have seen in other that they broke in metal. We're not talking about that one, but it's this kind of some type of energetic field that just keeps them blocked off. And they make this, this giant green spaceship that's gonna shoot out. And they're going to go explore this, the outer rim and to see what's to see what's blocking the Guardians from being able to kind of find out what's going on. So there's something like to find out what the threat is. So they're sending basically 1,001 man recon team out to do the work, which that's a big bulk of the lanterns, and so that's what they do. They shoot out into space. Just as they're leaving, two of the people who aren't doing this is the Teen Lantern and Simon. Like I said, Simon got sent to babysit. And they're going to stay on Oa and kind of deal with things, kind of help out. They're trying to figure out what's going on with the Gauntlet. As they're walking and talking, Kelly and John Stewart were close, and so she's kind of like, what am I going to do with Simon? He's kind of he's pissed because he's not going. I don't want anybody touching my Gauntlet. They're having this conversation, and but Kelly looks over and she's like, "Hey Simon, like, what's up with the big battery?" And he's like, "What do you mean? Nothing's wrong." And at that moment, the giant battery explodes. I mean, this is core to the Green Lantern mythos. This is where their power stems from. They just launched 1,001 people out into the bowels of space. They're trying to restructure. They just signed on to be part of this, the planetary oversight, the United Planets, and all of a sudden the source of their power explodes. And it wrecks the whole planet. And the book just walks, it shows you like what's happening out in space. And there's some like hooded, shrouded figure who's wearing a lot of yellow. You don't know who it is. I'm not saying it's Sinestro, but could be. It could very, very easily be Sinestro. I wouldn't be surprised if it was, but you don't know who it is. But he's sitting on this weird, like almost Kirby-esque drawn machine throne. Very, very much DC-esque type of technology. But the book starts showing you what's happening as this explodes. Oa is just, it's like a nuke went off. The vanishing point, all of those prisons are tapping out. Kyle was out in space. Kyle Rayner was out in space fighting people, and all of a sudden he doesn't have his powers anymore. And on War World, folks are just sitting there biding their time, smiling because they realize what's just happened. And it's going to be interesting to see the aftermath of this in the upcoming books, because like I said, they just scattered all their soldiers to the four winds, and now folks are arguably, the police force of the galaxy is arguably powerless, with a significant bulk of their forces out of range to do anything with. This is kind of where the story goes from being, oh my God, balls to the wall, interesting, to, just holy shit. And it really ties some things together that I didn't expect. There is and it brings you back to the present, and there's a lantern still got powers, still leaving a trail of green behind, that flies up to Oa and is seeing the wreckage and just doesn't know what's going on. She's talking to the ring, and it's just like, how did this happen? Where is everybody? What's going on? Is there any life forces around? And the ring's like, no, there's no lanterns around here. We don't know what's happening. You're the only lantern, I guess, it survived on the planet. Like, it's reading nothing, which could, it could mean that either everyone is dead, or that because they're not tapped into their power source, that's just not reading them as lanterns, on a planet full of people who should read it as lanterns. But the ring scans again, and there's one thing, it's an anomalous signature. And so this lantern flies down, and there's a little force field, and it's Kelly. And the gauntlet's on, and it's still working, because again, this is not the gauntlet's not a power ring. It works like a Green Lantern ring, but it's not one. And Teen Lantern was able to use this to shield herself and Simon, but it really looks like Simon's dead. And, like I said, spoiler warning at the beginning of the show, you can't get mad at me, but look, obviously I don't think Simon's dead. Simon's like, they're not going to end it that way. Imagine they're going to do the superhero thing and save Simon, but also the interpretation's not working. And so Kelly's, speaking some dialect of Spanish. Nobody knows what's going on. And the last page shows you who this lantern is. And I'm not going to spoil it, but if you've been paying attention to some of the extra Lantern stuff in the past couple of years, I think you're really going to dig who just popped up into the main Lantern book. It's fun, and I can't wait to see what they do with this character in the mainstream continuity of the world. Because as far as I know, you've only seen this character one or two times, or I should say, in one or two series that don't necessarily tie into what you would expect. So I'm excited. I got chills when I saw it. So looking forward to it. I'll fill you in next week or the next issue. I can tell you, I'll spoil it for you then. But yeah, go check out Green Lanterns. I think this is solidly going to be one of my favorite ongoing DC books right now. It's nuts, dude. It is. They use everybody. Like Thorn throws the kitchen sink at this book as far as the what's happening. So talk about coming in and just whipping it out and making a mark. Because I couldn't imagine being the dude who has to follow Morrison on a Green Lantern story. I mean, even not liking that last tail end. Again, I think that does a disservice. Even me not being able to decipher or figure out what WTF was happening in that book. You don't want to be the person following Grant Morrison. You just kind of don't. It's not going to be good. It's not going to do you any favors, but does a really good job. Yeah. Nutso. So got me. I'm going through one of those waves again that we talk about. If you had asked me 3 months ago, I just wasn't feeling superhero comics, but something's happening just across the board where the superhero comics that I'm reading are good right now, and they make their way to the top of the stack every week. Just the ones I'm reading, and have been really impressive, especially like I said, especially with DC and in the books that I'm reading with DC, which are not the mainstream, not the mainline books. Well, I guess you could call Green Lanterns a mainline book. I don't think that's, but it's not. No, this isn't this not necessarily the Green Lantern who is the flag post. This isn't Hal Jordan, right? Like he's in the book, but it's not focused on him. And they killed a freaking Guardian. Lots of weirdness happening. So that was a lot. It was a lot to unpack. They put a lot into one issue.
Yeah. Wow.
So, yeah, dude, they blew up the power battery. I reverted to like a 12-year-old kid going, what? And that's on some level, that's what I want my superhero comics to do. If you're gonna do it big, and they did. So nuts. I can't wait to figure out where they're going. I really want to. I'll tell you offline who the mystery lantern is. So I don't want to spoil that for the folks listening at home. But well, man, we got anything else we want to talk about while we're still here?
Just what's coming up next week.
There's some good stuff, or at least it looks like there's some good stuff.
Yeah, I'm looking.
Oh no, go ahead. Sorry, I was just gonna say we can't really say that there is some good stuff because we haven't read any of it yet. But if we were gonna hedge our bets, I bet we're gonna like some stuff. Why don't you want to roll out first?
Well, the one I want to make sure and bring attention to is from Fantagraphics. This is a new series from Ed Piskor. It's called Red Room.
Mm-hmm.
The synopsis on this is aided by the anonymous dark web and nearly untraceable cryptocurrency, there's emerged a subculture of criminals who live stream and patronize webcam murders for entertainment. Who are the murderers? Who are the victims? How do we stop it? This is a series that Ed Piskor has been working on for quite a while, and it has gained a lot of steam.
Yeah.
So it's actually it looks like it's going to be one of Fantagraphics' most successful, issue 1 launches.
Yep.
So, I mean, I really like Ed Piskor. I certainly like his work. frankly, the subject matter of this is not really up my alley, but it's a creator-owned series that, by a guy that I really like. So I really felt compelled to mention it. If you're a horror fan, sounds like this is going to be right up your alley. Especially if you're into gore. It's been described as splatterpunk.
Mm-hmm.
If anybody doesn't know what splatterpunk means, Google it. Then clear your browser history. But this looks like it's going to be just a no holds barred, just balls to the wall violence fest. And I do have some appreciation for that. Just, that he has we have the freedom to do these kind of things.
Right.
So from a freedom of expression angle, I appreciate it as well, even though it's not necessarily my cup of tea.
Well, it's something way different than what we've seen from Ed Piskor before. I mean, so, I've been reading Ed Piskor stuff since WYSIWYG. And he's never shown this side of his work. And I'm a big fan of the way he draws. Like he brings that stylized OG look, outlaw comics look to it. So, and I want to say you're talking about, it looks like this is going to be one of the best selling things from Fantagraphics. Didn't they come out and say, hey, like this is broken records for us, like as far as the number of pre-orders go, like this has by far been the most number ones we've ever sold.
It's one of the top. I haven't heard him say that it's outdone everything, but it's lining up to be one of their best launches to date is the message I keep hearing.
And that's impressive. That's really impressive. So
So I got to give him props for this one.
Yeah, and I mean, if we're going to talk about it, let's talk about it. They've got their own podcast / web show, Comics Kayfabe. We've talked about it on the show before, but if you like our show, they're actually professional artists and who speak the language and know the history and stuff like that. So they can bring something different to the table. And let's not be stupid. If you like our show, there's almost a 99% chance you already know that exists. So, but if you've ever been wondering, maybe it's your cup of tea. I know, Matt, you're a big fan of it. I'm not up to date, but I certainly was listening for a long, long time.
I love their Cartoonist Kayfabe show. I mean, they're both professional artists, full-time professional artists that have also put in the work and have gone through the training. I mean, they both went to the Kubert Art School. So they've put in the time. So what they say carries a lot of weight because they take it very seriously from an execution standpoint and a creativity. They really appreciate creativity maybe more than anything. They're not going to beat up on somebody because the illustrations don't match up with the human anatomy perfectly. Mm-hmm. Their thing is, how big of an impact did this make on me as a reader? Right. Not how close does it look to an actual human being? I mean, in one of their videos, they make a really good point, or that's actually kind of boring, because you can look at a Grey's Anatomy book all day and that's dull. So, they make a lot of interesting points to where it really comes down to artistic development and artistic delivery that pretty much trumps everything else.
Yeah. And it's, I like so Tom Scioli is also on there quite a bit, and I really enjoy his presence on the show when he's there. Because he just brings that little something extra with him. Not that show needs any extra. They got a lot. So, but him and Jim Rugg especially are just they have a lot of perspective to offer. I will say this because there's part of, and I've said this on the show before, there's part of Ed Piskor that rubs me the wrong way on that show, but because he's like we've talked about it before, he's prone to call people jobbers, this, that, and the other. But I will say the show is called Kayfabe for a reason. I think he's playing a heel half the time, and I think most people are in on that joke. So they're not going to pull any punches though, and that's one thing I'll respect. They say what they say and they stand by it. So they're not fluffers. They're not going to blow anybody up who they don't think is worthwhile. And damn, do they get some good interviews. Good interviews.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
So go check that out. We'll make that we'll put that on the short stack too. Or not the short stack, the the menu for next week. Go listen to a Comics Kayfabe book. Speaking of a book that I think that they would like, I have no idea if they've spoken about it or not, but I certainly think that it would be up their alley. The book I think you should go check out this next week is the 3rd issue of a series that I have just fallen in love with. I adore this book. It's UltraMega #3, written by James Herron, written and drawn by James Herron, I should say, colored by Dave Stewart, from the folks over at Skybound and Image Comics. This story, if you've been keeping up with it, I've talked about it a little bit. It's very much a Ultraman versus Kaiju-esque type story, except in this story, Ultraman's dead-ish. But there's a kid who's supposed to be carrying on the legacy of the UltraMega, fighting monsters on behalf of humanity. But things happen, things change. Now this person named Noah, this kid, is fighting for his life, in a little bit of a Romanesque Colosseum, being put up against kaiju and things that he's not prepared for. So I'm a huge fan of James Herron's. So I'm a fan of James Herron's artwork first and foremost. The story in James Herron books, for me, they're always fun. They're always kind of crazy, but it's always the artwork that draws me in first. So definitely go check that out. It's going to be interesting. It's going to nail the landing. I feel it in my heart that it's going to stick the landing. So
nice.
That's all I've got this week, brother. Did we miss anything? Anything major happened this week?
No, I think we covered it all.
I think so. Yeah. So I'll say that I think Craig would want everyone to run out and pick up Shang Chi #1 next week. I think that's the book he would tell you to grab. Just because that's the one I want to tell you that he would want to grab. This one's being written by Jean Lung Yang. Dai Caron's doing some of the work. So is Lionel Francis Yu, which is a name you better know. Go check this out. Shang-Chi versus the Marvel Universe. So there's a show coming out soon. We're going to see what that's about. So pick up the comic. And look, if nothing else, come check us out on all those places I told you to check us out on. We got the Facebooks, we got the Twitter, we got the Instagram. We don't have a Discord or anything like that just because we're all busy and tired. And also we're old and technology doesn't work the way we want it to most of the time. But we'll figure it out from there. We hope you all have great weeks. Do us a solid favor. And if you download this from iTunes, leave us a rating and review. We would greatly appreciate it. Did I miss anything? Eat your veggies, wash your hands, get vaccinated if you haven't gotten vaccinated yet. Tip your waiter. Hey, go forth and love some comics.
Yeah. Shazam.
Kerplunk.